Today I'm making my high hydration Italian bread dough, which is a lean bread dough. And I'm using the kitchen in the box 300-watt mini mixer to do so. I'm either gonna break it or find out how awesome this cute little machine really is. It should be noted that this bread dough is over 100% hydration due to fresh milled flour holding in more water than refined flour. So you might be used to something with less water, but this works so well with more. I'm measuring 420 grams of flour. 40 of that is durum, and the rest is hard wheat. And I'm gonna put 400 grams of water in this bowl. 1/8 teaspoon of vitamin C is being added. I'm gonna leave out the sugar, and I'm only gonna put in flour, water, salt, and yeast. And I'm going to use my quick no-weight Yudane. To make my no-weight quick Yudane, I'm gonna zero out the scale, and I'm going to add about 25 grams of flour. I'm gonna zero out the scale, double that for 50 grams of boiling water. Very carefully, but quickly, mix this together into a paste. Now, what makes my method different than everybody else's method on this is that I'm not going to tell you you have to let this cool in a refrigerator for several hours or even overnight. We're just simply going to mix it till it's a thick paste. Make sure you get it all. Okay, and once you got this thick paste, the gelatinization of the starches, everything that you need to happen has happened, okay? We only needed to wait if we were adding our yeast right away, because this would kill the yeast. But we're not doing that. We're just gonna take our Yudane, my quick, no weight Yudane, we're gonna plop it right in there. This is one of the reasons I can't get behind the tenzong. Do not have the patience for that. I want quick, I want easy, and delicious. Tenzong could be delicious, but it's not quick and it's not easy. We're gonna add our salt and our yeast after we mix this with the whisk. If you would like, you could add a tablespoon or even 2 of vital wheat gluten, but you really don't need it. For this recipe, I'm taking off the splash guard because condensation was happening and I don't want my dough to get too hot. So if your splash guard is on, take it off to mix with the whisk. This is what our dough looks like after 3 minutes with the whisk on high. Somewhat of a thick mashed potatoes. And we're starting to get a little bit shiny here. So what we're gonna do is let this dough rest for 15 minutes so that it can absorb the water. We have a very high hydration dough, and it is gonna take us a little bit of time for this dough to suck up that water. Welcome back. I'm adding my yeast and salt, and then I'm going to put the whisk back in. Okay, that's about 3 minutes, minus a little bit of time here. Here's what happened. See how the dough climbs the hook? I'm going to use wet hands to get this dough out. And it is very wet dough. It's also very stretchy dough. It's just so goopy. This is one of my favorite doughs to play with. And you can see how the dough just stretches across the whisk. That's some pretty darn good gluten development. There we go. If you don't like what your dough looks like when you're done whisking, you may continue to use the dough hook to mix. That way you don't overheat your bread dough. Go through and do my stretch and folds like this. And now the dough has much more stretch to it and structure. And so you just keep going around in the bowl and get it nice and tight. This dough, I wouldn't need to do a first rise. It's really nice. But we're gonna do first rise just because. Okay, so keep your hands wet so you don't get dough on them. The lid on. We're back. Our bread dough has risen, and see how jelly it is? Now it's much more workable. And I'm actually going to put this out on some parchment, and I'm gonna mill a little bit. Now, I don't want to lose this top area where I've been adding structure. So I'm going to put it out onto my hand, and then I should have wet my hand first. I usually do, but I forgot. So look at all those gluten strands. My oven's preheated. Start to shape this dough one more time before baking. As much air in there as I can. This would be a beautiful little loaf if we wanted a loaf, okay? And actually a loaf would be really pretty. Dust that a little bit for a nice crusty top. Turn it into a round. I'm trying to keep my hands from being too sticky. There we go. All right, and we got some little bubbles here. That's okay. We'll just let this dough rise right here on the counter. It's so fluffy. We got some, I can feel the spring coming back from this. And once my oven's preheated, I am just gonna wet my hands and tuck, give it a final little tuck here. Okay. Mostly so it stays on the parchment. What I am not going to do is score this. And the reason why is because we've got a lot of really nice big holes built up in this bread, and when you score it, it's gonna go and it's all gonna come out. We don't want that, okay? So we're gonna bake with steam. So I've had this dough sitting out. I actually did do a first rise, give it a rustic look. You don't have to coat it with flour if you don't really want to. Now, Italian bread, in order to get that crunchy crust that's also chewy and have that nice sealed in soft moist bread on the inside, we need steam to bake with. So what I could do is bake it in the oven on my baking stone and put like my big 6-quart Dutch oven over top of it upside down. That would be a Dutch oven we could use. Or I could just add ice cubes to the oven and spray once I put it in there, and then very quickly close the oven. And that's usually what I do. 1, 2, 3. No scoring, okay? Don't do it. Look at that, I'm just gonna plop this right in the oven, toss these cubes in, and then spray the top with water and close the door. There. And I'm gonna toss these in. I'll hear them falling through the cracks in a few minutes. And that's it. I'm gonna set my timer for 25 minutes. Okay, so 450, 25 minutes. Then I'm gonna lower the temperature to 400 for another 20 minutes and then take it out. I really like this recipe. And I'll admit, it's hard to work with a dough that's this wet. If you've been working with sandwich bread dough, we're talking like 60, 70% hydration, maybe 75. This is well over 100. It is very wet. It's fun to play with. But if you're having a hard time with this dough, don't quit. Maybe just add a tablespoon or 2 of flour and let your dough go through the first rise, and then make it from there. Or if you feel like this dough was too hard to work with, you can absolutely cut the water. That's why you'll see several different recipes on the website. There is one I linked that was for, I think, 380 grams of water to the 420 of flour. And it's a lower hydration because many people have never made this bread before, and we need it to be a little bit easier for them. But if you want to go all in, this is the one. This is my favorite. This cute little mixer totally did the trick. There go my ice cubes. I love that sound. And I just hear the steam going all through the oven. I can't believe how well this mixer did with this bread dough recipe. It did the super soft sandwich bread, no problem. It did this one with the whisks, no problem. So cool. This is what our loaf looks like so far after 25 minutes. Can you hear that crunch? I don't want to crack this open until it's cold. So I'm gonna set it on a baking rack to let it cool for about 3 hours. And then I will cut into it. And I will say that this loaf isn't as tall as some of my loaves. So if you're having a hard time with the dough spreading, you may want to cut the water just a little bit. Like instead of using the 50 grams for the Yudane separate, you could take the 50 grams from the original 400 grams of water, and that can help you. I actually really prefer it like this. And if I wanted it to grow taller, I would actually do this in my 2-quart cast iron. I have the Wagner cast iron, and it's just perfect for that. So instead of spreading out, being a super wet dough, it just spreads up, and it's just perfect. But again, I really love the size and the texture and the shape of this bread. Once it's cool, I'll cut it for you. Welcome back. I couldn't even wait an hour. I love this bread so much that even though it's still warm, I'm gonna cut it open. It's also soft, which is one of the favorite features about this bread. That's just from the sides. They're not the biggest holes right now, but as you get further in, you'll notice them. And if you remember seeing me put the dough into the oven, I couldn't get it off the peel. It was stuck. So try not to manhandle your dough when you put it in the oven, or you may degas it like I kind of did. But man, this bread is so good. Butter. I like eating a slice of bread with butter right before you go to bed. But I just love this bread. And the crust is chewy. I love this bread. Since I didn't let this loaf cool all the way, I'm just gonna set it on its end like this and let it rest overnight. And so when your bread starts to cool down, you'll notice that it's not, I mean, it's still a little crusty, but it's not as crusty as it was. And so when you leave it out on the counter like this, cut side down, it'll keep the inside moist, make the outside even crustier. And then when you toast it, wait for it, it's so good. Like, look at that big hole in there. See, they're in there. The less you work the dough, the bigger the holes.